From the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon, and welcome to the Library of Congress. My name is Colleen Chogan, and I'm the Deputy Director of National and International Outreach at the library. I'm excited to welcome our audience inside the historic members' room of the Jefferson Building here on Capitol Hill. And I'm equally excited to welcome our virtual audience joining us via live stream. A video recording of this event will be made available on the Library of Congress website. March is Women's History Month, and we're delighted to celebrate it with our new boss, Carla Hayden, who happens to be the first woman and the first African American to assume the position of Librarian of Congress. A few months ago, I noticed a lot of innovative accomplishments had begun to happen at the library. So what had changed? Well, you all know what had changed. One woman and her leadership can make a world of difference, and today's panel is living proof of it. Before we start, I would like to thank the Library of Congress's Office of EEO and Diversity for making this program possible today. Now I'd like to briefly introduce our participants before turning it over to Dr. Hayden for our discussion. Marin Alsop is the 12th musical director of the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. She is the first woman to head a major American orchestra and the only conductor to ever receive the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship. In 2010, she was inducted into the Classical Musical Hall of Fame. Previously, she was the first principal conductor and then the musical director of the Colorado Symphony Orchestra. In addition to her numerous awards, she has led the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra in key outreach initiatives, resulting in greater youth musical awareness and appreciation. A student of Leonard Bernstein, Alsop grew up in New York City and is a graduate of Yale University in Juilliard. Deborah Rutter is the third president of the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. She is the first woman to lead the center. In her capacity as president, she is the artistic and administrative director of the Kennedy Center, managing all aspects of the institution. Prior to her current position, Ms. Rutter served as president of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra and executive director of the Seattle Symphony. Yo-Yo Ma credits her for making the Chicago Orchestra more accessible to a wider audience through innovative educational programs and community engagement, a model she is currently replicating at the Kennedy Center. A native of Pennsylvania and Los Angeles, Rutter is a graduate of Stanford University and holds an MBA from USC. Molly Smith has served as the artistic director of the Arena Stage since 1998. She has led the reinvention of Arena Stage with the vision of creating a national center for American artists. In 2010, the Washingtonian famously referred to her as the unsinkable Molly Smith. During her leadership, Arena has workshopped more than 100 productions, produced 39 world premieres, and developed 9 projects that have headed to Broadway. Before coming to Washington, Ms. Smith was the artistic director of the Perseverance Theater in Juneau, Alaska. She has served as the literary advisor to the Sundance Theater Lab and formed the Arena Stage Writers Council, whose members are leading American playwrights. Ms. Smith is a graduate of Catholic University and has a master's degree in theater from American University. Our moderator today is Carla Hayden, the 14th Librarian of Congress. Please join me in welcoming these distinguished women to the Library of Congress.
I must tell you that I've been the Librarian of Congress for 6 months, and I've had many, many wonderful opportunities to interact with many people, the collections and things, but I have to tell you, this is super special for me because I have admired Marin for a long time. I've gotten to be very jealous of Deborah with that. And that unsinkable, Molly, wow. So it's wonderful to be with you and to have what I hope will be an honest and engaging discussion about being women in the arts in particular, but also in leadership positions. When I was introduced, it was the first African American, which of course is very significant in many ways for me personally, but being a woman in a feminized profession where 85% of the workforce is female and the top leadership does not reflect that fact, is really significant for my profession and has been talked about. So in my journey, I had a beginning of not even knowing I was going to be a librarian, being an accidental librarian, I call it. And I wondered how your journey started in terms of the arts, and then how did you make that shift from being in the arts to arts management and leadership? When did that switch happen? Molly, you want to?
Sure. Well, I was interested in the arts and theater from when I was a little girl, and went to Catholic school, and thought I was going to go into a pre-law degree. And in the middle of traveling through Europe at the age of 19 with a backpack on, I decided I was going to chuck all that, follow my heart, and start a theater in Alaska. Okay? How crazy. Everybody thought I was crazy. So in a sense, I moved from artist to administrator right away, studied for the next 7 years to make that happen, and then drug 50 used theater seats to Alaska to start the Perseverance Theater. That's still alive and kicking now. It's 38 years old.
That's great.
And then about 19 years ago, I came to Arena Stage. So I think I'm an artist who's always wanted a home. And oftentimes when you want a home, it also means that you combine the artistry with management.
Unsinkable.
That's good. Great name, Perseverance.
Now, Deb, you've got an interesting way of getting into management from art.
Well, actually, I think mine is very parallel. As a young person, I was the beneficiary of a time when there was music and art in schools. So in my public school, I had the opportunity to become a violinist, literally. My third grade teacher said, which instrument will you play? Not would you like to play, but will you play? Played in orchestras and followed my heart. Thought I was going to go off and get some other job, not really knowing that there was such a thing until I was in college, and was introduced through family friends to the field, and had my first summer job, my first real summer job. I had other summer jobs. My first real summer job was at the Hollywood Bowl for the Los Angeles Philharmonic, and I discovered that there's this whole world of arts management. So I took a pretty traditional course in this way, but I would say that every decision I made in my life was following my heart, which needed to follow music, and I was never going to be able to spend enough time in a practice room to be doing what she does. So I get to support, basically what I do is to support what these two people do.
And that's great. And violin, that's you got
Well,
a
yeah,
similar.
I was a violinist, of course, but when I saw, my dad took me to a young people's concert when I was 9, and I was getting in a lot of trouble playing violin and trying to lead the orchestra from the back of the violins at Juilliard pre-college. So then this guy came out to conduct who was jumping around like a lunatic, and I turned to my dad. I said, oh, I could be the conductor because nobody's yelling at him. And so that I was 9, and that was Leonard Bernstein, and eventually he became my teacher and mentor, and he was my hero for my entire life. But I think as a conductor, and especially as a woman in a field where there were very few women, you have to be an entrepreneur, because you don't have an instrument as a conductor unless you can coerce at least 20 or 30 people into coming over every day to practice, with you. You don't have an instrument, so it's all about what you can put together. And the way I learned how to conduct was by getting all my friends together and creating an orchestra. So I ran my own first orchestra and learned, hands-on how to do marketing and build a board and all those kinds of great things. So now I'm just a really annoying music director because I know a little bit too much. I don't know enough about management, but I know more than I should.
That's
Everyone
a
can,
theme
you're
with,
just lucky you don't have me.
with doing that. Now, are there special challenges for women in the arts in terms of pay equity, discrimination? Have you experienced that?
You know, that's such a, from my perspective, it's a question that I'm asked often, especially by journalists. And I think it's, I don't know, the arts is such a difficult field anyway. It's really hard to ascertain which aspect of what you're doing is causing some kind of discrimination, because there's so many ways that you can run into obstacles. And I really think that, for me, I think part of my success is never attributing any of my difficulties or rejections to being a woman. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, instead I always thought, okay, I have to be better. Let me try to, how can I get something positive out of this and learn from it and apply it to what I'm doing? So that's how I've reacted to it. I don't know if you have similar experiences.
Well, what I would imagine for you, and is true certainly in my experience, is that there are preconceptions about what people believe should happen. You know, what will a woman wear on a podium?
Right.
What do women wear if they're a soloist playing the violin or the piano or anything, the flute, whatever it is? So there are just gender expectations, and those expectations are one that we all have, male and female.
That's true.
And that we all have to sort of deal with and understand. And those are the kinds of expectations that are difficult to overcome, because if you don't fall in line, then there's going to be a discussion of, well, she didn't fall in line. So, you know, how many men have to buy gowns to do their work? I have to buy, people ask me, what are you wearing tonight? When was the last time somebody asked a man what he was wearing to an event?
Especially at a black tie event.
Right, exactly. So, you know, but I think Marin's comment is right. You know, the arts is a different kind of business. And so the interactions that we have with our bosses, the interactions that we have with our patrons, with our potential patrons, are all a little bit different. But there always is this issue of how do people treat women and men and what the expectations are. And I think that's the part that you constantly are working to overcome.
There are pretty shocking statistics in the theater as far as men and women. Of the major theaters in the United States, and there are 1,800 theaters now, really started by 3 intrepid women, which included Zelda Fitch-Handler of the Arena Stage 70 years ago. And there are large theaters, and of the large theaters, only 20% are run by women. In terms of plays that are produced by these 1,800 theaters, only 22% are written by women. So let that penny drop. And you start to look at that. When you realize that that's happening at the leadership level, that means it's happening because boards are leaning more into male candidates. It means that headhunters perhaps have more males who are the headhunters. It means that we need to do much more in terms of mentorship of young women who are coming up and support them. In terms of changing the paradigm, it's a paradigm shift. I mean, I would agree with what everybody else has said, but then I think there's the other piece which just has to do with the statistical difficulties of what women face in terms of leadership positions. It is that you have to be better. And wasn't it Flo Kennedy that said, fortunately, that's not difficult? Which I always thought was a very funny line. But it's complicated. And I think the idea of mentorship is so powerful because it is the step in. It is the door opening. Even for me, more than education, it takes you in a whole other direction because mentorship is a one-on-one relationship that shows you the path. And I think without mentors for me, of people like Joy Zinnemann and Paula Vogel, who's a brilliant playwright, I don't know if I would be here.
You know, the statistics in classical music are even more dire. I think it's of our programming, is it 5% by women composers? I mean, it's really, and I'm sure for conductors it ranges around there as well. But I would just jump in to say that I agree so much about this concept of mentorship, but also I had a recent, if I can tell a little anecdote, I was conducting in Lucerne at the festival this summer, and I insisted on giving a masterclass for young women conductors. And an older woman in her 80s came and talked to me, and someone said, "Oh, do you know who she is?" I said, "No, she seems to know a lot about conducting." Well, her name's Sylvia Kaduf, and I'd never heard her name. And so I found out from someone else that she was Bernstein's assistant in 1966 at the New York Philharmonic. She was the first woman to win the Metropolis competition, also the first woman to conduct the Berlin Philharmonic. And I had never heard of her. So I went back to Lucerne 2 weeks ago with a film crew I hired from Berlin. And I'm making a film about her. And it was awesome to find her story. But this idea of how can we change the landscape? If we don't do it, the three of us here, nobody's going to do it.
Right.
So for me, that meant for conducting, and tell me if I talk too much.
No.
I might be there already.
Oh, no.
But for conducting, you know, for women, you get one opportunity to conduct, and you have to remember that you haven't practiced with your instrument before, and all the information that you're trying to process and adapt to and adjust to is so overwhelming, and you have only one chance, so you can't make a mistake. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to make mistakes in order to really achieve greatness, in my opinion. So in 2002, I started a fellowship for women conductors, young women conductors, and I bring them around to orchestras I'm conducting, and they just do the opening piece. So it's not the pressure of the whole concert on them, and get some feedback from musicians and from managers and things like that. And I have to say that of the 11 winners of the fellowship, 4 are now American music directors, 5 are assistants with major orchestras, and 2 started their own orchestras. So I feel that, you know, at least in a small way, maybe by creating opportunities, but this is to your point, that society isn't accustomed to seeing women in these positions, so we have to try to change that. Even for me, too, seeing women in certain roles it's a little bit jarring, isn't it?
It's jarring to normalize it.
Right.
Say that that's not anything unusual.
And we're predisposed to being receptive to that. So
Right. Deborah, are you doing some things in terms of encouraging more diversity?
A couple of different things I wanted to say, which is that what I know about the work that they do is that the level of individual self-promotion has to be pretty high. And we who are the ones making the choices along the way have to be really open to it. And it's really important for us to understand that sometimes those behaviors of self-promotion amongst, this goes again to what is expected and what is understood in different ways, is that a woman being self-promoting could be perceived as aggressive, whereas a man doing that is just doing his job, right? So there's always this sort of balance of perception, and there has to be the mentorship and the open invitation, because as I think about it, it's really hard sometimes to sort of cut through to see the true gem that is there without the self-promotion. So it's one of those things that we have to add to our toolkit in a way that feels comfortable for us, but that for others can receive it as well. For us at the center and as a manager, as an administrator, in fact, women are not the problem. Sometimes we need to find more men to sit around the table with us. Because we are mission-driven institutions, we are magnets for women who care about what they're doing, and women like me who said, well, I love to sing or I love to play the cello, but I wasn't good enough, so I can go and work there. And at the center, we have countless dancers and actors and people who are former somethings who come and work. So internal for us is not so much the issue of gender, but it's really about the issue of diversity, background diversity. And this is something that is very important to me, and that we're working to really put a focus on this. And our HR team has a whole new diversity and inclusion plan. Most importantly is that we're developing something beyond the internship, which is a true fellowship program. And that fellowship is about identifying future arts administrators with diverse backgrounds, diverse interests, and bringing them into the center and really doing the same kind of thing that you have done, and sort of helping give that extra boost, that extra lift.
But on the administrative.
But on the administrative, because if you don't have, so it works in both ways. You know, if you don't have the leadership, they don't have the vision, the perspective to offer. And so this is about having a table of people around which you put so many different voices and making sure all the voices are heard. It's a big priority for us.
That's great.
We have a fellows and internship program at Arena Stage called the Alan Lee Hughes Fellowship Program that has been going now for 25 years, and it is for young people from diverse backgrounds. Over 700 people have been through it, and because we just hit the 25th year, we went back to find out how many are still working in the arts. 92%. Ooh. So this is, again, it's a one-on-one mentorship program. It's been going for a long time in every area like theater management, artistic directing, playwriting, just about every area, lighting designer. And our field now is rife with the young people that have come out of this program. We also make sure, because I believe every act we make in the arts is a political act. Probably every act we make in our lives is a political act, because it's about choices, right? And so this year, 7 out of our 10 plays are written by women or men of color, because I combine that in terms of what I see as far as diversity. And there are 8 plays directed by women or men of color. And I try and balance it on a yearly basis, because I think who you put on the stage, those are the voices that the audiences hear, and that's the way audiences start to change in their perspective of who's a leader and who isn't a leader. So we just keep trying to right the balance as far as the programming and the ideas that we put on stage.
From my perspective, of course, then when I came to the Baltimore Symphony, looking at the makeup of the orchestra on stage, you know, the Baltimore Symphony has and still has one African American member, and how to change that makeup is, I mean, it's a long-ranging vision that one has to take. You have to take, you know, that, okay, in my lifetime it may not happen, but the reality is that the kids aren't getting access to instruments young enough in order to gain, first of all, the interest and the skill to audition for an orchestra at this level. So that's when I approached my musicians and said, listen, why don't we mentor one kid in the neighborhood? I mean, that didn't go so well, but the idea developed into a program where we started with 30 kindergarten kids in 2008, and today we have almost 1,500 kids playing instruments. And 17 are now at the School for the Arts, the high school. They've been accepted because they're now getting old enough to get to high school age. But you know, how long it will take for a program like Orchids and some other programs that have come up to impact our major orchestras and our major stages, who knows? But if we don't start, you know, that's the point, right? And also, it affects our audiences. You know, now all these kids and their parents are big classical music fans. So
because they attend the performances because they're children. So that gets to what, Deborah, you mentioned. There are very few arts programs now in schools. So isn't that a big challenge in terms of looking at your future audiences, your future?
Well, I could talk for the next 3 hours on this topic.
Well, we're going to open it up for question and answer in a minute.
You know, I most recently lived in Chicago, and what was really interesting is that the northern suburbs had fantastic music programs, because the school districts in that area were wealthy enough and had leadership and input from family enough that they had really great programs. It was the schools in the city and on the south side that were suffering the most from this. And the tragedy of this is that the programs around any kind of art, whether it's dance or theater or music, are what keep kids in school, keep them focused, get them really engaged with being successful. And so this is not so much a strategy for building audiences for our theaters of the future at all. I am here because of my third grade teacher. Yes, my family cared about it and still do, but my teachers were the most important people in my life who brought me to this place. And there's increasing scientific knowledge that supports the idea that being engaged with the arts helps with brain development, which then, of course, leads to school success. So this is really a campaign that is so much not about arts organizations, but people who care about what it can do for young people. And that's my not-so-secret goal, is to have every child be able to have access to arts education. So Orchids is a perfect example of this.
But we see the kids. It's exactly. I mean, we don't have the kind of funding to study it in depth, but anecdotally, I mean, I see the kids growing. I see them developing. I see them gaining skills that they can apply to any discipline they select.
Exactly.
You know, and the goal isn't to make them all classical musicians, although I wouldn't mind that, of course, but the goal really is, you know, in 20 years when I go to the doctor and she says, oh yeah, I remember you, I was an orchid.
Right.
You know, or the mayor, or whoever, the leaders of our community, because the important skills you develop are the ones that you need in every field.
That's
It's
exactly
true.
right.
Yep.
It's called a discipline for a reason.
It's
Yeah.
about creativity, it's about collaboration, innovation. These are all skills for future workforce.
And it's how they feel about themselves also, you know, I remember, you know, math is always, you're either right or wrong, you know, it's a 50-50. If you play a violin, you're always right, I'm telling you. You know, it's really,
I don't know about violin.
well, maybe not always.
violin.
My son, I don't know, he's
No,
not in my house maybe.
Yeah. Well, there's a great example in Chicago today, the Kenwood Academy, which it has a really beautiful jazz program that has been built and nurtured by people who really love the school and who love the music program there. And with just a little bit of an extra boost and attention, the school and the children are so much more successful as a result of this. We did a project with them in Chicago, and Jason Marin, our artistic director for jazz, loved it so much that he reprised it and changed it based on his relationship with these kids, and brought the 3 years later, so it was a next generation of high school jazz band, to Washington to perform with him. And what this does for these children on the south side of Chicago is so powerful.
Yeah, it's great.
I know about Kenwood on
Yeah,
the south
yes,
side
I know
of
you do.
Chicago, and that's something. And the theater part, and getting them involved with.
My biggest fear about losing the arts in the school is that we lose innovation in every field. That's our number one power, I think, as like our American energy, that kind of entrepreneurship, because what the arts teach you has to do with teamwork, ideas, imagination. You know, the greatest freedom we have is our imagination. And I don't think we are taught it in the same way in the sciences. So that's why I keep arguing for not STEM, but STEAM. Let's put the power in it as well. So we reach about 20,000 young people at Arena Stage every year. But the one program I'd like to talk about is Voices of Now, which is 10 different groups of young people who develop stories from their lives over a 9-month period of time, and then they're all produced at Arena Stage and end up touring at different places as well. Now, anecdotally, we have a lot of information about what happens to the young people after this program, how many of them then go on to college, how many of them go on to graduate school, how many of them go on to great careers. And again, it's fantastic that one-on-one relationship changes a young person's life. And so fighting for programming in the schools, I think, is really important because what's happened basically around the country is theaters and arts organizations have taken up that banner, and we're doing the arts programming within our own organizations.
What about teacher education and, you know, helping teachers that might not have a formal arts program do something?
Well, this is a big issue because, of course, so much needs to be done in the primary classroom, and those teachers are not experts. So teaching artists are really critically important. And teaching artists come in by contract with a school, and they stand side by side with the classroom teacher to help augment that training that happens. We at the center have a pretty significant one that we do in various parts of the country, and we understand that teacher training is really vital. We work with teaching artists as well. A program that we just brought on last fall is called Turnaround Arts. It started out at the President's Committee for Arts and Humanities, and Michelle Obama was sort of the champion for this program. And it was about using the arts to help turn a low-performing school into a higher-performing school. So it was beyond teaching arts education. It was integrating art into the daily life. So you'd learn multiplication tables by singing, or you'd learn history by creating a play or acting. And so we're in about 60, I think it's 60. I keep inflating and I don't want to overinflate yet, but we're in a whole lot of low-performing schools across the country. I've only had it in the program for about 6 months now. But it's a very exciting program because we work by providing resources to the school, teaching artists into the school, training for the school as a whole, not just certain school, in the classroom teachers. And then we pair them with celebrity artists who actually make a point of going to the school multiple times in a year to draw attention to the school and build morale for it. But it's fascinating because it's a different approach than what we as arts administrators have had, because when arts programming started getting cut 40 years ago, or more, 40, almost even longer than that, we as arts institutions first got angry and frustrated and kept saying, well, it's the school's responsibility, it's the government's responsibility. Right. And we didn't at that time go in and say, let's partner. Now we have to partner because otherwise it won't exist at all. So in some cases, our organizations are the only ones providing that. Right. But we are trying with Turnaround Arts to demonstrate that the use of the arts can actually help improve a school. And through making that case and getting the research to support it, then we might be able to have a larger impact.
And haven't you been able to attract, I know with ORCID, philanthropy, arts philanthropy has increased?
Yeah, of course. I think that, well, I mean, there are a few things I'd love to say. That something that is on my mind, at least at the moment, is that I hope that this small amount of government support for the arts that we now currently have, that everyone speaks out to preserve the National Endowment for the Arts. It's a very, very small token support of the arts, but I think it's very important that that we insist that our leadership in the United States of America at least advocates for the arts in some small measure. I mean, I work as music director also in Brazil, in the Sao Paulo Symphony. And I have to say, for Brazil, where, I mean, everything's in chaos constantly there, yet the leadership of the country believes that art is a vehicle to promote tolerance and peace among people. And so even when things are cut, the arts are cut proportionately, not disproportionately. And, that gives me pause to think that here in South America, or there in South America, they could have this kind of visionary leadership, whereas here in the United States, where it's so integral to who we are, I believe, as Americans, it's all about the individual, the creative power of entrepreneurship. And that's what we're all about, sort of fundamentally, and yet we're not supporting that. It's not about the arts. We make it sort of a siloed experience. It's about creating people who are well balanced and who have a vision and can think outside the box. Maybe that's the biggest thing the arts gives you. Whether you ever go into the arts or not. And of course, it's always a struggle in the United States because we have to build support, philanthropic support on every level, and it's not just that you have a good idea, but then you have to fund it, and then you have to measure it. That's the part I struggle with. Everything has to be measured here.
Yes, what are the results?
Yes, can we have the data? So,
A full human being, how about that?
yeah, really. Just
Well,
maybe shake the kid's hand.
I have stood side by side with this issue and the argument about data for a long time, and have come to believe that sometimes if you can demonstrate what really happened, we certainly count the number of people who have attended performances, we are counting the number of women in roles, et cetera, et cetera. If we can see what the impact is. The issue really is we are always living on a shoestring.
Yeah, that's what's
And
hard.
because you want to put more money into the art, you don't really want to put money into the things around it that might support it in the long term. And so this issue of doing research and evaluation and keeping track of it is one that we in our field have really not done a great job at. And that as I have come to the Kennedy Center, we do more of for exactly the reasons that we've been talking about
Well,
here.
you have that mandate. Do you find, though, I think we've done a very poor job also of educating the public as to the financial benefit of arts. For every dollar spent in the arts, it exponentially reaps results that are exponential to the investment. Right. And we haven't done a good job of publicizing that and getting that message out to the public, I don't think.
That seems like it'd be a very strong point.
Well, just earlier this week, Darren, at the Americans for the Arts program, Bob Lynch spoke about the fact that $145 million of the NEA is worth some, a huge magnitude, like $800 billion.
I'm not surprised.
Not million, but $1 billion of economic impact. And so we're not, this is not a trivial thing, what we're standing up for. But if you can track what happens to a young person who's involved with the arts and where they go, whether and how the arts have influenced it, I think that can be something that is really important for us to be looking at. I think the Americans for the Arts are doing more of it, but we need to do it more as individual institutions.
Go ahead.
When Arena made the decision to stay in Southwest Washington and rebuild, that whole program and the new Arena stage really became a catalyst for a building in Southwest Washington, which has been seen as a forgotten quadrant. Mm-hmm. There are now 36 different developments that are happening there. If you drive down in Southwest, you'll probably see 15 cranes in the air. Yeah, you do. Now, would that have happened without Arena? Probably in about 15 or 20 years. Did it get pushed by Arena? Yes. And we see that happening in communities all over Washington, D.C., and indeed all over the country.
Yeah, all over.
The arts are real drivers of economic expansion. My fear about the loss of the NEA, the loss of the NEH, the loss of all of our cultural programs is what is really going to happen in smaller rural areas as well as in cities. Because for smaller rural areas, that often is the only money that they have to have the school program, which is teaching young people how to do puppetry or teaching young people how to make plays. That's it. That's it. Mm-hmm. You go out to some place like Kotzebue in Alaska, and is that whole program going to be cut? So that really changes the equation. It's a narrowing of vision about the beauty of who we are as Americans. Yep. And that's what I think the attack is, and that's why I think it's so important for all of us to get out pen and paper and write our legislators and let people know, because we know pressure works. Yep. It works.
I just got my high sign that I have to, we're going to open it up for a little Q&A, but I just wanted to do a little inside scoop thing here. You can break some news. Do you have anything that you could share with us that's coming up?
Oh, God.
This is YouTube, Facebook.
And this is what we don't want anybody else to know except
of course,
room, right?
But some upcoming projects that might be interesting. You mentioned Lorraine Hansberry.
Yeah.
That's coming.
Yeah, Raisin in the Sun is coming at Arena Stage. But I wanted to mention Sovereignty that's coming next year to Arena. This is part of our Power Plays initiative. We have 25 new plays and musicals that are being commissioned by Arena Stage for each decade, beginning in 1776 to the present decade. We've already commissioned 9 people, and one of them is Mary Catherine Nagel, Native American lawyer, activist lawyer, wonderful playwright. Her play is Sovereignty. It takes place both in 1830 with Andrew Jackson and broken treaties, and present day broken treaties between the Cherokee Nation and also the United States government. This is a story that hasn't been told.
Wow, that's fun.
And that's one of the things that I love to do in the theater.
Wow. Deborah?
Well, you know, as we sit in this really amazing building in this beautiful room, it seems as though many people know so much about the history of our city, our country, and the buildings in Washington, D.C. But even I didn't own it the same way I do now, which is that the Kennedy Center is the living memorial to John F. Kennedy. There is no other memorial. There's a library and all of that, but this is the memorial to John F. Kennedy. And, you know, a lot of people didn't realize, I knew it, but I didn't know it to live it. And so as we are on the countdown to his what would have been his 100th birthday on May 29 of this year, we are really thinking about our identity as it relates to both being a performing arts center and the living memorial to JFK. And we're having just an extraordinary season full of programming that is so easy to attribute to things that he stood for. Because not only did he and his wife care so much about the arts and humanities, but the other things that we attribute to him, courage, freedom, justice, there's one, freedom, courage, justice, gratitude. And we are building all of our programming around it. And there's sort of a culminating week of activities at the center. All of this has been announced, so it's not new news.
Oh, shoot.
Other than the fact that I don't know that people are really paying attention to it in quite the same way. We're bringing back open house. We're going to have a day of celebration for JFK. And it's really been affirming to have such a generous, articulate, inspiring man to be the namesake of our space. And I actually am looking forward to an effort that will sort of revitalize the memorial aspect itself, so that the center will be a must-visit location, the way the Library of Congress is a must-visit location for all who visit our nation's capital.
Yeah, we're working on that.
That's great.
Explain a little later.
Well, I don't have any big secrets.
Oh,
I know it's terrible, but I mean, for those of you who don't know the Baltimore Symphony, I mean, all I can say is that, you know, we're sort of we're the poor cousin up the road, but the quality of our orchestra and the level of passion and commitment from the musicians of the Baltimore Symphony, I think is really unparalleled in the United States. I think it's one of the really great orchestras of the world. And I'd invite you to come and hear the orchestra anytime. And it's nice as we're ramping up also to 2018, which is the 100th anniversary of Leonard Bernstein. And so it's nice because we have that connection also with the Kennedy Center, because Bernstein wrote his Mass in honor of JFK. So there's always that nice connection. And of course, Bernstein inspired so many people, and as I said to start, was my hero. So we'll be doing a lot of programming around that, of course.
Well, I must say, and I said I'll mention it later, but the Library of Congress is connecting to all of you.
Yes.
We have his papers. We are going to be part of the celebration. The Lorraine Hansberry and the Lee Strasberg archive.
Cool.
So we will be supplementing, complementing, and being part of what you do. And the orchids are coming.
And orchids are going to come and play
right
here
in the Great Hall.
Yeah.
So we are just delighted.
Well, thank you, Carla.
We're delighted. So we'd like to open it up for questions or comments and things. You have, talk about Women's History Month.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for your very candid comments. In the course of the discussion up there, the term leadership was used at least several dozen times. So, and we have 4 very distinguished women up there who have achieved significant leadership positions in their chosen professional path. So my question is, can you talk a little bit more about your personal leadership style and maybe a lesson or two about leadership that you learned as you developed into a leader?
Looking at you guys first.
Well, that's a really great question, and I will start only because these two have more creative answers than I do. But I do think that that's why there has been an increasing number of women in managerial positions in the arts. And it's because I am a consensus builder, and I work on building teams. I am not an autocrat who says this is the way it's going to be, this is what I care about, this is only what we're going to do. And in fact, whenever I have a group of colleagues who ask for that direction, I push back even harder, push my seat away from the table, and I say, no, we are doing this together. Building that team who believe in where we're going and how we're going to get there. And that's the most rewarding aspect of it. Now, you go to a different city and you find a new culture when you go into that organization. And sometimes it takes a while to change from one style to another. And I haven't ever inherited a job from another woman, so I build a different kind of atmosphere in the organization. And it's much more fun, and you get so much more done, and there are so many more creative ideas that come out of your institution when you can lead by building a team who all have a common vision.
And I would say the most important part of leadership is communication. Because the worst thing in the world is to be a leader, leading the band, and there's no one behind you.
Yeah.
And so it's all about communicating whatever the particular vision is, whatever the particular idea is, and also recognizing that sometimes it takes a lot of time to make whatever that dream or that vision come true. When I came to Arena, I refocused Arena on American plays, American ideas, and American artists. It had been much more of an international company and American work before that time. It really took 8 or 9 years to do that in a full way. And it's really ensuring that everybody who's at the theater leads in their own way. Because people want to lead, and people need to lead. They're their own experts. So giving people the power to be able to do that, I think, is incredibly important in leadership roles.
Well, I agree with everything you're saying. I think being a good leader is also being a very good listener. I think collaborative leadership, trying to nurture collaboration. But I think at the end of the day, as a leader, you have to accept accountability. And especially, in an orchestra, it can't be a democracy. And so ultimately, even though a lot of people would like it to be, I think ultimately, from my perspective, just a personal sort of mantra is that I'd much rather be respected than liked. And often if they respect you long enough, they end up liking you. So Eventually. But that can't be one's motivation. I think sometimes leaders have to make the hard decisions and stand alone for the good of the art. And if you always put your art first, you can't go wrong.
That's wonderful. Just on a side note, as a leader and as a woman, making sure that there's a safety net for making mistakes, and that you as a leader can reveal that you make mistakes, you do things, and it's okay. as creating that safety net. Another one. Wow. And wasn't it funny how I said you guys? So as soon as I said, okay, Women's History Month.
I applaud each of you, and I hear a lot about children, and I am a substitute teacher and an artist and a senior citizen. And what I want to know is, where do you see our place in the arts as I hold up my card as being a senior citizen?
Well, I just told Marin about a lady who she knew, Nettie Taylor, who just passed away recently at 102. And her greatest joy was bringing young people to the BSO, the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra, and being that person, even with the wheelchair, everything. Nettie Taylor would sit there and make sure that she was part of that. So I just have to say
But don't you think we could do, I think we could do a lot more with,
Yes.
with seniors and getting them involved, especially, you know, one of my dreams is for our Orchids program is to offer our retired musicians who have this unbelievable wealth of knowledge, a post-orchestra career, working with the Orchids and putting a whole training program into place. I think that when I look at our many of our volunteers are older people who are involved with the kids, and they're so devoted and so dedicated, and they also come with this lifetime of experience and knowledge, and so, but I think we could offer more, because I think it's a resource that we're not taking advantage of as we could.
You know, if you think about the work that's often done by corporations sort of searching after the 18 to 24-year-old,
Right.
and I have spent all of my career sort of scratching my head about why are we always talking about wanting younger audiences. Part of the reason we're looking for younger audiences is because we're all aging, and we're all aging into being seniors, and we're all aging into that time in our life when we actually have more time to do other things. And we need to make sure that you have young people coming in. And it's about making the connection throughout life, whether it is the youngest person to a senior, or seniors then helping young people come into the arts and have that experience. And I think that as I experience with my own family and with my own organization, we're thinking more about the programs that we're offering to audiences of all ages, and understanding, in fact, that music and dance and theater can be even more important as you age. And it's not just because you have more time, but actually it is a part of what happens in your whole physical cycle and your brain and keeping yourself healthy. So this is actually something that I've been thinking about. I've not got a fully formed idea yet, other than the fact that I see that some of the most active people in my life, both at work and home, are the ones who are working and active and engaged still. And those are the ones who are docents and helping out as teaching assistants for our education programs. But I've really come to think that developing some programs that are sort of health and wellness programs for people of all ages, and seniors in particular, would be something that would be a great way for us to benefit from. But this is also something that we don't always know a lot about, because we're dealing with, we're our own age, we're thinking about bringing young people in. So it's an area that I think that we, as our population ages, as there's a larger population that is of a different age, we can think about the role that we are in terms of providing services, whether active participatory ones or as patrons. And so it's a wonderful question, and it's one that happens to be sort of resonant for me right now as we're doing some work. Actually, I will tell you a secret, which is that we're doing a program that hasn't really been out there too much yet. It's with the National Institute of Health, and it's around health and wellness and music and the brain. And we're looking at how music has an impact on young kids and what it can do is for music therapy, we talked about that,
Right.
and then all the way through creative aging. And so it's something that's really, top of mind right now. Thank you.
Creative aging.
Creative aging. Creative aging.
Like
We
that.
should all think about it.
I think we need that.
I'm trying to be creative.
Another question.
Hi, I work here at the library, and if I had more time, I'd talk about the author named Marguerite d'Angeli that influenced both Dr. Hayden and actually me in going into a career writing about Quakers, which is just an aside to say I ended up getting a PhD in American Studies, but had you asked me at the same age, about 10 or 12 years old, who I wanted to be when I grew up, it would have been Leonard Bernstein. Bernstein.
Wow.
Bernstein.
No, Bernstein, you're right.
Bernstein, sorry. My cousins are Bernstein, he's Bernstein. The height of my conducting career was to conduct the high school orchestra for one piece in my senior year. My question is about talent in the arts, or the idea of talent, which I think as I look back, I don't know how much talent I did or didn't have, but at a certain point, it didn't seem to me that I had the talent to be an orchestral conductor, and I went in other directions. I also played the violin, by the way. But I think that at the time, there weren't senses of role models for women in those ways, and I heard you all talk about mentorship, but I don't actually know the answer for where talent versus, so it's a nature-nurture kind of question, I guess. If you could talk about that a little more, because it's a big deal in the arts, it seems to me.
And before you start, I'm laughing because I'm the product of two classically trained musicians, and I'm sitting here as a librarian. So that tells you about talent, and that's why this is so important. Violinist and a pianist. So talent does.
I don't know. I have some. Maybe I have some very idealistic view of talent. I think the word creativity is often restricted to people who have chosen the arts as their discipline, whereas I think that creativity is inherent in being human. When people tell me they're tone deaf or something like that, I think that's simply not possible. Someone told you that, and then you started taking that on, or you can't draw. I was told, oh, you're terrible at that. So I always say that I have no talent for that. But instead, if someone had said, well, let's see, let me help you a little bit. Oh, that's nice. It's all about mentorship, I think, and encouragement. The thing I like about the Orchids program, and it's not targeting talented kids. It's democratic. I believe everyone's talented. I believe that if that had been a passion for you and someone had encouraged you, you could do what I'm doing now. For me, it's all about opportunity and exposure. And every kid I find is, I became a parent very late in life, and I was amazed at what my kid could do, but it was only because I had no, my expectations were this high. And so when I started with the Orchids, my expectations were also this high. And then they, immediately, the kids go to wherever you put the bar and higher, in my opinion. I think every child is born with enormous talent and genius, and we just gradually suck it out of them, And that's what we can't afford to do. So maybe I'm very idealistic about this, but I believe you have the talent that I have.
I have a couple of different stories of circumstances where a really influential teacher or conductor would actually say and gave examples where hard work was actually more important than talent.
A lot.
Because somebody who has raw talent will actually just coast without the hard work. And so, the people who we see as genius are using raw talent and then working really hard at it. And so that's why I would always encourage to stick with it. My problem is I didn't want to be alone in a practice room. And so
it's whether you have the personality to endure it, I think.
Exactly. But I love it like crazy. And I dedicate enormous amounts of my time in a different way. really supporting it and experiencing it. So it's really about how you spend your time. So absolutely, you could have been a conductor. There was a long path to travel, but.
And I would totally agree. I think that there's like 5 or 10% talent, because everybody has talent, and the rest of it is perseverance, persistence, gutsiness, aggressive, pushing through all of the rejection, and being able to say, no, I can still do this. But that also has to do with self-image, you know, the people around you supporting you, saying, you can do it, you can do it. And that's one of the most important things that we can give to young people and adults as well, because I believe in the lifelong education, that curiosity is through an entire life. And even if you don't think that you have the talent to do this thing, just try. Just try. Go out and do it. It's amazing what it will open up.
And to be able to recognize it, and that's sometimes the part that's really gripping, when you know that young people might not have the opportunity to have their particular talent recognized at an early enough stage. You can't. Maybe you're not good at drawing, but there's a child over there that's singing all the time.
That's right.
This one is doing that. The greatest gift my parents gave me was at 12, we all agreed that when they looked at musical notes, they heard music. And when I looked at text, I heard words. And that was okay. And then I went off with words and appreciated it. But to know, sometimes you drive in neighborhoods and you look on corners and you see people and you say, wow, when did the light go out in their eyes? When was that 4-year-old not given a chance to do that? And here they are.
But that's the spiral that is so difficult, that if you get into that downward, if you are caught somewhere in that spiral and you don't have the network that can give it to you. So it has to come from teachers, it has to come from community leaders, it comes from somebody, if it can't come from your parents, and mentors, and that's why we have to have a network that supports people.
Right. I think we have time for one more question or comment, and to really, in this celebration of Women's History Month, I can't thank you all enough.
There's one more question back there.
Okay, I wanted to echo everyone else and just saying thank you all so much for coming out and sharing your experiences for this event. My question is, as women of power, how do you all weave the concept of intersectionality into your organizations in regard to hiring or promoting or just generally creating pipelines so that arts leadership may be more inclusive to women of color?
Well, you spoke to that, didn't you?
Well, first of all, you have to be very explicit in saying this is a priority and having broad ownership, because if just one person owns it, it can't succeed. But if you can get broad ownership throughout your institution, in my case, it was extremely helpful that the board was right there with me, if not perhaps ahead of me when I came to the center, and therefore putting the structure in place. It does, though, mean that you have to put mandates in place. And so for us now, there can never be a final candidate pool that doesn't have diversity in the pool. And a conversation that always takes place, both from the hiring people. Now, I'm lucky because I have an institution that has really great reach. And I want to use the size and the reach of this institution to help build as many future leaders as possible. But I believe it can happen in any kind of organization. It has to be something that you believe as a core value, and you have to have the whole team doing the same thing, because the one person isn't doing all the hiring. There are a lot of people doing the hiring, but I think that Molly's given a great description, because there are jobs everywhere. It's not just in sort of the administrative aspect of it. There are jobs throughout our buildings that are supporting the arts and are a way into our organization.
But we're looking also to try to create diversity on our board of directors. I'm sure everyone's, the good thing is that it's an open conversation now. And I think there's an awareness of the dearth of diversity throughout our field. So I think that's exciting because people are willing to have the conversation and really try to at least change the landscape to a certain degree.
We look at it holistically at Arena Stage. When I came to Arena, our audience was not diverse. And so I walked the streets of Washington, D.C. I went into the churches in Washington, D.C. I went into some of the Baptist churches. And of course, Washington, D.C. is a black and white city. And there was programming that we had on stage that really focused on the African American experience, but our audiences didn't reflect that. And this is unusual because Arena started as the first integrated theater in Washington, D.C., 68 years ago. And so it's in our bloodlines, the importance of this. And so I realized that it all happens through programming. And so about a third to half of the work that we do every year is around people of color. When I was in the Baptist churches, I saw the way in which people welcome people is they would stand outside the door and shake hands with people all the way into the church. So we changed our usher structure so that there are people all the way through the theater saying, welcome, come in. We had people all the way outside because theaters tend to be places where people are a little bit nervous coming in. And so eventually, now almost 30% of our audience are people of color. That's one of the most diverse in the United States, one of the top
awesome.
Ones in theaters.
Congratulations.
And that's something that we work on a daily basis. Our staff is diverse. Our programming is diverse. Our board is becoming more diverse. We have a wonderful chairman, Judith Batty, who's African American. And we just keep working at it. You know, as you said, Marin, it's moment by moment. It's day by day. It's doing exactly what Deborah says, which is when we have a pool of people who we're looking at for a particular position, there has to be a person of color within that pool who can get the job, right? It can't just be, well, we can't find anybody. Go out again.
Keep looking.
Keep looking. And so that's where we as administrators need to keep our own feet in the fire.
I can't thank you all enough because this, even though, and all of you that are here today, because this is Women's History Month, but women's history is all year round.
Yes.
And I just thank you so much for bringing the art.
We're so proud of you,
leadership.
Carla.
Thank you for
Well,
bringing
thank
us.
This has been a presentation of the Library of Congress. Visit us at loc.gov.